Every month on a Wednesday morning, the same deposit lands in tens of millions of American bank accounts. For a retired worker, it currently averages $2,084, straight off the Social Security Administration's own June table. And what that deposit actually buys depends almost entirely on your zip code. In some towns, it's spent before the month is up. Move a few states over, same check, same person, and there's money left standing on the last day. Tonight, I'm counting down 20 American towns where that check stretches further than almost anywhere else, and each one earns its spot a different way. Some sit in states that stop touching retirement checks altogether. One mails you part of your property taxes back every summer. Every home value tonight is Zillow's June figure. Every tax rule comes from the state that wrote it, and every town gets one honest drawback because you're choosing a life, not a postcard. The town at number 1 sells its typical home for less than 4 years of those checks, but we actually start at the beach. Here's a town 45 minutes from the Mid-Atlantic's favorite beaches, in a state with no sales tax, where the yearly property tax bill on a typical house wouldn't cover 1 month of rent in a coastal city. That's Seaford, on the Nanticoke River in southern Delaware. A town that once called itself the nylon capital of the world because DuPont opened the first nylon plant on Earth here in 1939, and the paychecks from that plant built the tidy brick neighborhoods you'd be shopping in now. The typical home runs about $321,000 on Zillow's June index, which makes Seaford the most expensive stop on tonight's list by a wide margin, and that's exactly why it opens the show instead of closing it. Seaford doesn't stretch your check on the house, it stretches it on everything after the house. Delaware charges no sales tax on anything you buy, ever. Not on the car, not on the groceries, not on the new dock line for the boat. And its property taxes have a national reputation for sitting near the bottom of the table. A retiree who sells a place in New Jersey or on Long Island and lands here often watches their annual property tax bill drop by 90%. And that's not a figure of speech, that's the actual order of magnitude people report. The state also runs a school property tax credit for homeowners 65 and up, worth as much as $500 a year, though newcomers should hear the fine print now rather than later. Delaware makes recent arrivals wait 10 years before that credit kicks in. What you get in the meantime is a working river town with its own hospital, Tidal Health Nanticoke, inside city limits, a river walk where the Nanticoke slides by full of blue crabs and slow boats, and Rehoboth and Lewis close enough for a Tuesday whim, but far enough that you're not paying beach prices for eggs. Run an ordinary month here and you feel the design, the pharmacy run, the hardware store, the grocery cart, the birthday gift for the grandkid. Every one of them rings up at sticker, no add-on, and by December, that silence at the register has compounded into real money. The honest math says Seaford is the weakest stretch of the night. The honest life says a check goes surprisingly far in a state that never once takes a cut at the register. 2,000 miles northwest, the logic flips completely. Montana skips sales tax too, one of just a handful of states that do. But out here, the house itself gets cheap as well. Miles City sits where the Tongue River meets the Yellowstone, a cattle town of about 8,000 that the Army founded in 1876 in the aftermath of the Little Bighorn, and it has spent the century and a half since then perfecting the art of not changing. The bucking horse sale still takes over the third weekend of May, 3 days of rodeo stock auctions, street dances, and horse trailers from 5 states, a tradition running strong for over 70 years. The typical home costs just under $252,000 on the June index, and once you own it, Montana leads your wallet alone at every cash register in the state. No sales tax on the truck tires, the groceries, the fly rod, any of it. For a retiree spending down a fixed check, that's a quiet raise of several $100s a year that never shows up in any brochure, and unlike a discount, it never expires. The town keeps its own full hospital, Holy Rosary Healthcare, plus the Range Riders Museum out by the river, a sprawling, wonderfully unorganized barn of saddles, rifles, and pioneer photographs that holds more real cowboy history than most state capitals manage. The Yellowstone here is the longest free-flowing river in the lower 48. The fishing is good and uncrowded, and locals walk its gravel bars hunting Montana agates the way other towns walk malls. A week here settles into a shape fast. Coffee downtown early, the river before the wind picks up, sale barn Tuesdays just to watch the theater of it, and errands that never once involve standing in a line. Retirees who move here from sales tax states report the same small shock. The receipt matches the shelf tag every single time. Now, the drawback, and it's not a small one. January means stretches of below zero air that make a heated garage a medical device, and the nearest big city amenities sit 2 hours west in Billings. You trade winter comfort for register savings and open country. Some people read that trade and wince. The ones who don't tend to stay for decades. Typical January low here, around 8 degrees. In the 1840s, steamboat money built Madison, Indiana, into one of the richest towns on the Ohio River. And then the railroads moved the money elsewhere and nobody had the cash to tear anything down. The result, 180 years later, is over 130 blocks of preserved brick storefronts and federal-style mansions that make up one of the largest historic landmark districts in the country. You can retire inside a postcard here for about $250,000, the June figure for the typical home, and the town gives you a working calendar to go with the architecture. Every July, the Madison Regatta brings hydroplanes screaming down the river at 200 miles an hour, which is a sentence nobody expects from a town full of antique shops. In winter, the show reverses. The crowds leave, river fog rolls through the valley at dawn, and bald eagles hunt the open water below the dam upstream. Late September splits the difference, when the Chautauqua Arts Festival fills the historic blocks with painters and potters, and the weather finally behaves. Retirees here talk about the town in seasons the way farmers do, and every season has a job. Indiana plays nice with retirees in an undramatic way. Social Security is never taxed at the state level, and everything else faces a flat income tax of about 3% that the legislature keeps nudging lower year by year. No cliffs, no worksheets, just a small, flat number. The town has its own full-service hospital, Norton King's Daughters Health, a genuine advantage on a river stretch where many towns bust their emergencies an hour out. And Hanover College sits on the hilltop next door with lectures and concerts open to anyone. Clifty Falls State Park hangs its canyon and waterfalls directly off the west end of town, close enough that the morning walk can include one. Put the average check against this place and the margins turn friendly. No state hand in the check itself, a small flat bite on anything else you draw, and a Main Street priced for Indiana wages rather than tourist wallets, at least Monday through Friday. The honest catch is the summer haze off the river, thick, humid, and long, plus a tourist season that fills Main Street on Saturdays whether you're in the mood for company or not. If this ride down the river is working for you, hit subscribe before the next bend. It costs exactly $0, which makes it the one thing tonight even the #1 town can't undercut. Once a day, the Southwest Chief rolls into a little brick depot at the foot of Fisher's Peak, and you can board it in your slippers and wake up in Chicago or Los Angeles. That depot belongs to Trinidad, Colorado, the last town before the New Mexico line. And the train might be the most underrated retirement amenity on tonight's list. No airport shuttle, no security theater, just a platform 3 blocks from a Victorian downtown where the streets are literally paved with bricks stamped by the local brickworks a century ago. Coal money built this town ornate. Bat Masterson once kept the peace here, and the whole place still looks like the set of a Western that someone kept living in after the cameras left. The typical home costs about $235,000 on Zillow's June number, which buys real masonry and real history at an elevation of 6,000 feet, high enough that summer evenings cool off properly. Above it all sits Fisher's Peak itself, 19,000 acres of new state park with trails still being cut, and the Highway of Legends loops west into the Sangre de Cristos for the kind of drive that makes visiting grandkids finally look up from their phones. The A.R. Mitchell Museum downtown keeps a serious collection of Western art, the kind of place you take your time in. Mornings start cool and blue at this altitude, even in July. The light comes off the mesa's gold by late afternoon, and when the grandkids visit, the fact that a real train delivers them to a 100-year-old depot does half your entertaining for you. The town runs its own hospital, Mount San Rafael, with Pueblo's bigger systems an hour up the interstate. Colorado sweetens the deal for people who stay put. The state's senior homestead exemption wipes out taxes on half the first $200,000 of a home's value, which fits a Trinidad house almost perfectly. But listen to the residency rule before you celebrate. You need to be 65 and have lived in that same house for 10 straight years before it applies. Move here at 65 and the discount arrives with your 75th birthday. Until then, you pay the full bill, and nobody at the closing table is going to volunteer that detail. What actually happens to your check when a state changes its mind? Missouri just ran the experiment. Starting with the 2024 tax year, the state stopped taxing Social Security benefits entirely. No income limits, no phase-outs after years of clipping retirees who cross the threshold. For a town like West Plains, tucked in the Ozark Hills 18 miles above the Arkansas line, that law turned an already cheap address into a genuinely efficient one. The typical home costs about $233,000 on the June index, and the town of 12,000 punches far above its weight on the one thing retirees quietly organize their lives around. Ozarks Healthcare runs its hub right here, a regional system with a full hospital and a bench of specialty clinics that towns 3 times this size would envy, which means the cardiologist is a 5-minute drive, not a season of scheduling. The same law that freed your check also lets Missouri counties freeze a senior's property tax bill in place, so the number you pay at 65 can be the number you pay at 80. Against the average check, this town fights at a lower weight class. Groceries and services priced for the hills, utilities that don't spike, and the big fixed costs nailed to the floor at exactly the moment your income stops growing. The town's soundtrack helps explain why people stay. This is old-time music country. Porter Wagner grew up here, and on warm evenings, the pickers still show up around the courthouse square the way they have for generations. The Avenue Theater downtown still stages community shows. The library holds down its corner of the square, and the calendar runs on church suppers, gospel sings, and the county fair, which sounds quaint until you notice how full it keeps a week. Heart of the Ozarks is the town's own phrase for itself, and for once, the slogan is just geography. A short drive south, Grand Gulf State Park drops a collapsed cave system so deep the locals call it the Little Grand Canyon of the Ozarks, and one of the largest springs on the continent boils up just over the Arkansas line at Mammoth Spring. Norfolk and Bull Shoals put trophy trout and bass water inside an hour. The catch here is cultural fit. This is a deeply quiet, deeply rural corner of Missouri, and if your idea of a good week includes a gallery opening or a direct flight, Springfield is 90 minutes away, and the honest answer is further than that. North Dakota's bottom income tax bracket is now 0%, and the top one is 2.5%. Add the fact that the state hasn't taxed Social Security since 2021, and you get a tax picture most retirees assume requires a beach and a brochure. It actually requires Jamestown, a prairie town of 15,000 halfway between Fargo and Bismarck, where the typical home costs just under $218,000 on Zillow's June index. The town's mascot is a 60-ton concrete buffalo named Dakota Thunder, standing guard over the National Buffalo Museum and a live herd that grazes in the valley below, which tells you something about how seriously this place takes its plains history and how little it takes itself. Louis L'Amour was born here, and the town still carries that flavor. A working railroad town with a frontier village preserved at its edge, wooden boardwalks and all. Jamestown Regional Medical Center gives the town its own modern hospital on the hill, one of the newest hospital buildings in the state. The University of Jamestown keeps concerts and ball games on the calendar, and the reservoir north of town handles the walleye habit, with derbies that empty the coffee shops on summer Saturdays. Come October, the traffic shifts to blaze orange because this is serious pheasant country, and half the out-of-state plates in town belong to hunters who eventually retired here to stop needing the plates. The two real cities of the state bookend you at 90 minutes either way, close enough for an airport run, far enough that nobody commutes. Summer evenings belong to the reservoir, pontoons idling against the sunset, and half the town's pickups parked at the boat ramp. And by October, the same trucks carry firewood, because everyone here preps for winter like it's a second job. On the money side, the pieces stack neatly. A retiree drawing the average check and a modest pension can land almost entirely inside that zero bracket, which means the state's cut of your retirement rounds to nothing. And the property taxes on a $200,000 house stay manageable because the house never costs $400 to begin with. The check stretches because nobody upstream is pinching it. Winter is the toll, and it's a real one. January runs painfully cold, the wind owns the prairie from November through March, and the town measures blizzards the way coastal towns measure hurricanes. That's the deal. Steam rises off the Bighorn River all winter here because Thermopolis sits on one of the largest mineral hot springs in the world, and the state of Wyoming, honoring an 1890s agreement with the Eastern Shoshone and Northern Arapaho that the water stay free to all, keeps a bathhouse in Hot Springs State Park where soaking costs nothing, not discounted. Free, year-round, at a steady 104 degrees, with a herd of state-owned bison grazing the red hills above the terraces and a swinging footbridge crossing the river below them. That's the retirement amenity budget handled for life in a town where the typical home costs just under $214,000 on the June index. Wyoming charges no state income tax on anything, your check included, and its property taxes run famously light, so the carrying costs stay small after the closing too. The town of 2,700 keeps its own county hospital, Hot Springs Health, walkable for most of town, which for a place this size is close to a miracle. Then there's the dinosaur situation. The Wyoming Dinosaur Center on the edge of town holds one of the better fossil collections in the country, digs real sites every summer, and lets you pay to work one for a day, which explains the number of retirees around here with suspiciously good sunburns and stories about a thigh bone. Legend Rock, one of the great petroglyph panels of the West, hides half an hour out, and every August the town stages the Gift of the Waters pageants at the springs, restaging the agreement that keeps the water free, which might make Thermopolis the only town in America that throws an annual festival for a treaty it actually honors. South of town, the Wind River Canyon drops half a mile of red rock wall straight down to Blue Ribbon trout water, and the drive through it to Boysen Reservoir might be the best 20 minutes of road in the state. The honest drawback is scale. One real grocery store, a 2-hour drive to the airport in Casper, and specialist medicine usually means Billings. While you're soaking in that free mineral water thinking it over, go ahead and tap subscribe. It works faster than the hot springs and makes fewer promises about your hips. Number 13 is Ely, Nevada, and it's the shortest story of the night because the pitch is almost embarrassingly simple. A high desert town at 6,400 feet, cool summers, a typical home at about $212,000 on the June index in a state that has never taxed a dollar of anyone's income. Ely was built by copper and kept alive by stubbornness. Its crown jewel is the Nevada Northern Railway, a complete working century-old steam railroad that historians call the best preserved in America, and retirees here don't just ride it. The railroad will let you pay to drive the locomotive yourself, and half the volunteer crew restoring the rolling stock is past 65. The old downtown wears fresh murals, and the Hotel Nevada still runs its lobby like it's 1948. An hour east sits Great Basin National Park, the emptiest and starriest park in the lower 48, with ancient bristlecone pines and a glacier cave under a 13,000-foot peak. Beehive-shaped charcoal ovens from the mining days stand in a state park south of town. Fall pours aspen gold down the ranges above the valley, and the road that brought you in is US Route 50 itself, the one the magazines named the loneliest road in America, which Ely prints on souvenirs with something like pride. The town keeps a small hospital, William B. Reary, with rotating specialists covering the gaps, and the high desert sun shows up for work close to 300 days a year, which keeps both the winter heating bill and the winter mood in check. And now the drawback, which is the whole rest of the story. Ely is one of the most isolated towns in the continental United States. Salt Lake City and Las Vegas are each about 4 hours out, and there's no flying the grandkids in on a Friday. The check stretches beautifully here. The question Ely asks, and every remaining town will ask it in some form, is how much company does your money need? Follow the lonely highway far enough east and you hit the opposite proposition, a Green River town where the water does the entertaining. Savannah, Tennessee sits on a bluff over the Tennessee River, and its case is the clean two-step. Tennessee taxes no personal income at all, and Hardin County's cost of living runs near the bottom of the national table. So the typical home here costs $202,000 even on Zillow's June index, while the checkbook math underneath it runs cheaper than the sticker. 15 minutes south, Pickwick Landing State Park wraps a lodge, a marina, and some of the best smallmouth bass water in America around the Tennessee Valley Authority Dam. And the catfish houses along the river below it have been frying dinner for travelers since before the lake existed. 10 miles west sits Shiloh, one of the most hallowed and quietly beautiful battlefields in the country, where retirees walk the spring dogwoods among the monuments and the riverbirds. History runs right through town too. The Cherry Mansion on Main Street, still standing over the river, was General Grant's headquarters the morning the battle began, and the Tennessee River Museum downtown tells the whole valley story, mussels and pearls and gunboats included. Savannah holds about 7,000 people, a courthouse square that still functions as one, and Hardin Medical Center, a full county hospital that keeps the routine stuff local, with Jackson's bigger hospitals an hour north when it isn't routine. The week finds its rhythm on the water without anyone planning it. Bank fishing at dawn, the pontoon out by 10, catfish plates on Friday, and the farmers market Saturday morning before the heat leans in. The check math works the way the map suggests. No state cut of your income, groceries and services priced for rural Tennessee wages, and a property tax bill that stays in 3 figures for plenty of homes in the county. Winter is the quiet reward season, mild enough that the boat never truly gets winterized, and the lake thins back to locals. What you give up is speed. Memphis and Nashville are each better than 2 hours. Summers are long, wet blankets of heat, and the county's pace can feel less like relaxing and more like idling if you arrive without a plan. Typical home, $202,000. Everything after that is a fishing question. There's a category of retiree this next town serves better than almost anywhere in America, and hardly anyone says it out loud. Iron Mountain, Michigan, population 7,500, up in the Iron Country of the Upper Peninsula, hosts a full Veterans Affairs medical center. Not a clinic, not an outpost, the Oscar G. Johnson VA Medical Center. An entire hospital campus with inpatient beds, a pharmacy, and specialty services. In a town where the typical home costs just over $197,000 on the June index. Towns 50 times this size don't have one. For a veteran couple planning around VA care, that single fact rearranges the national map, because the usual trade is cheap house or close care. Pick one. Iron Mountain hands you both, then adds a second hospital, Dickinson County Healthcare System, for everyone else. The money picture got friendlier on a schedule. Michigan never taxed Social Security, and as of the 2026 tax year, the state finished phasing out its tax on pension and retirement income, the last step of a 4-year rollback that restores the full deduction no matter what year you were born. So a 2026 move-in date carries actual meaning here. The door just finished opening. The town itself is pure UP. A ski jump on Pine Mountain that ranks among the largest artificial jumps on Earth draws international competitors every winter, and watching a human being fly 500 feet in a snowstorm is a legitimate reason to own a thermos. The mining museum keeps the Cornish pumping engine, a machine the size of a house that once drained the shafts, and the old Italian neighborhoods still argue about porchetta the way other towns argue about football. Fume Lake's quiet trail loops sit just east of town. Piers Gorge churns whitewater 20 minutes south, and there are more lakes within an hour than you could fish in a decade of Tuesdays. For the non-veteran, the math still lands cleanly. A house under $200,000, Michigan's flat income tax of just over 4%, touching only whatever income survives the new full deduction, and Social Security never in the conversation at all. The honest ledger has one heavy line item: snow, measured here in feet per season rather than inches per storm, with real winter from Thanksgiving to April. Shovels, plows, and patience are non-negotiable equipment. What you get back is the rarest retirement combination on tonight's list: a sub-$200,000 town with big city medicine twice over. Remember Seaford's trade back at number 20? Cheap life or cheap house? Pick one. Iron Mountain quietly refuses to choose. From the highway, the strangest sight on the Oklahoma prairie is a green copper tower rising 19 stories out of a town of 37,000. Frank Lloyd Wright built exactly one skyscraper in his life, and he built it in Bartlesville. Phillips Petroleum money made this the most improbably cultured small city on the plains, and the leftovers are everywhere. The Price Tower on the skyline. Woolaroc, the oil baron's ranch turned museum in the Osage Hills, where buffalo graze the entrance road, and the lodge holds one of the great Western art collections anywhere. A summer music festival that a town this size has no business sustaining. And Kiddie Park, a 1940s amusement park where the rides still cost pocket change and grandparents are the primary customer base. The living is priced like Oklahoma anyway. The typical home costs about $189,000 on Zillow's June index, and the typical rent runs around $1,250 a month on Zillow's rental index. One of the few towns tonight small enough to feel like a find and big enough to have real rental data. Oklahoma doesn't tax Social Security, and for homeowners 65 and up with household income under the county's median, the state runs a senior valuation freeze. File once at the assessor's office between January and mid-March, and the taxable value of your house stops climbing permanently, no matter what the market does around it. Your biggest fixed cost becomes an actual fixed cost, in writing. The Pathfinder Parkway threads 12 miles of paved trail along the Caney River. Bahuska and its now famous Mercantile sit half an hour west for the pilgrimage every visiting sister will demand. And Tulsa's airport and hospitals wait 45 minutes south, close enough to use, far enough to ignore. The retiree calendar here reads like a city's, a real symphony season, a summer music festival, museum lectures out at the ranch, and the grandkid circuit handled by a park where the carousel still takes coins. Ascension St. John runs the hospital in town. The drawback is the weather's temper. This is Tornado Alley proper. Spring sirens are lifestyle, and August bakes like a kiln. A town Wright thought deserved a skyscraper, priced like a town nobody's heard of. On paper, this next entry looks like a mistake. New Hampshire property tax rates run among the highest in America, and Berlin's rate sits high even for New Hampshire. So why is a mill town on the Androscoggin River at number 9? Because rates are percentages, and percentages need a base, and Berlin's base is the cheapest housing in the no-income tax Northeast. The typical home here costs just under $186,000 on the June index, roughly half the New Hampshire average, so even a steep rate lands on a small number, and produces a bill many Massachusetts retirees would mistake for a quarterly payment. Meanwhile, the state takes nothing else, and as of January 2025, it means that literally. New Hampshire never taxed wages or Social Security, and it just repealed its final income tax, the one on interest and dividends, so your savings account and your check now share the same state rate, 0. There's no sales tax either on anything, which is why the outlet plazas down in the valley fill with Maine and Massachusetts plates every weekend. Berlin's second act is happening outdoors. The mills closed, the town grieved, and then it restocked itself as the ATV capital of the Northeast. Jericho Mountain State Park's trail network runs practically into downtown. The Summer ATV Festival is the biggest event of its kind in the region, and the Old Nansen ski jump, once the largest in the world, stands restored just up the river like a steel exclamation point. The presidential fill the southern horizon. Moose patrol the highway north of town often enough that locals name the stretch for them, and Androscoggin Valley Hospital keeps care right in town. Price out the whole month and the paradox resolves itself. No income tax, no sales tax, a mortgage size for a $186,000 house, and a property bill that stings in percentage terms and shrugs in actual dollars. Gorham's stores sit 10 minutes south, and the drive over to North Conway handles the big errands twice a year. Winters are long, the paper mill pass left scars the town is still sanding down, and Boston is 3 hours on a good day. If a town this stubborn can reinvent itself on trails and cheap Victorians, the least you can do is tap subscribe. It's the only thing in New Hampshire with a lower rate than the dividends tax. The morning light on the High Plains does something to brick, and McCook has the brick to prove it. A turn-of-the-century railroad downtown, a Carnegie Library, and improbably the only building Frank Lloyd Wright ever put in Nebraska, the Sutton House, sitting on a residential street like it's nothing. 2 towns, 2 Wrights, 1 list, and this one's cheaper. The typical McCook home costs about $184,000 on Zillow's June index. Nebraska used to be one of the stingier states for retirees, and then it simply wasn't. The legislature accelerated its phase-out, and Social Security benefits are now fully exempt from state income tax, every dollar, every income level. That change is recent enough that the national retirement guides haven't caught up, which is part of why a check goes quietly further here than in towns with 10 times the reputation. This is also the town of George Norris, the senator who spent 40 years dragging electricity out to rural America, and his house, kept now as a state historic site, sits 3 blocks off the avenue that carries his name, a fitting monument in a town that runs on practicality. The morning coffee crowd on Norris Avenue will have your name inside a month whether you volunteer or not. McCook anchors its corner of the state the old-fashioned way, with a real hospital, community hospital, a junior college keeping the calendar and the gym full, and Heritage Days every September when the whole town turns out for parades and barbecue. Golfers drive hours for Heritage Hills, a public course routinely ranked among the best in the state, where the green fee costs less than a city parking ticket. Red Willow Reservoir handles the fishing 10 minutes north. Evenings out here run long and cinematic, 100-mile sunsets off the porch, the college's concert series in winter, and the night sky that city grandkids genuinely gasp at because nobody warned them stars came in that quantity. The honest problem is the map. Denver is 3.5 hours one way, Omaha closer to 5, and the nearest commercial flight is a planning exercise. Out here, distance isn't a drawback exactly, it's the price printed on the tag. Run the school tax math on this one because it barely exists. In November 2025, Texas voters raised the school district homestead exemption to $140,000 and stacked another $60,000 on top for homeowners 65 and older. That's $200,000 of home value shielded from school taxes, and the typical Brownwood home costs $174,000 on Zillow's June index. Do the subtraction. For the typical senior homeowner here, the school portion of the property tax bill, historically the biggest line on any Texas bill, rounds to zero. In a state with no income tax at all, that turns this stretch of central Texas into something close to a fee-free zone for a retiree who owns outright. Brownwood itself is a lake town wearing a courthouse square. Lake Brownwood spreads out 15 minutes north with a state park on its shore and hybrid stripers in its depths. Pecan Bottoms shade the river through town, and Howard Payne University keeps a college hum going downtown. During the war, this was Camp Bowie, 80,000 soldiers training on the Mesquite Flats, and the town still carries that unpretentious, get-it-done posture. Lunch culture matters here in a way that's hard to explain to outsiders. There's a cafeteria on the highway that has been serving chopped beef and rolls to the same family since the 1940s, and eating there twice a week is a legitimate retirement plan. Spring pays the county back for August. 6 weeks of bluebonnets and paintbrush turning the ranch roads into postcards. Hendrick Medical Center runs the hospital, part of the Abilene system, with routine care local and the bigger campus 90 minutes up the road. Evenings, the lake catches the last heat of the day, and the pier fills with folding chairs, and you realize the town's whole recreation budget is a cooler and a rod. The city and county still take their smaller property tax cuts, so the bill isn't zero, just startling. And that's the honest asterisk alongside the obvious one, which is August. Central Texas summer is a 2-month argument you cannot win, and the shade of a pecan tree is worth more than any exemption. Even so, on pure arithmetic, no town tonight got more generous more recently. Three rivers meet at Coshocton, Ohio, and in the 1830s, that made it a canal town, mules towing barges up the towpath toward Lake Erie. When the canals died, the town did something unusual. It kept the whole neighborhood of the era intact, and Roscoe Village now runs as a restored canal district where costumed guides work the blacksmith shop, the gardens bloom in season, and a replica canal boat still glides behind draft horses on summer afternoons. Living next to all that history costs about $170,000 for the typical home on the June index, and the money mechanics here are modest but usefully aimed. Ohio's homestead exemption knocks a meaningful chunk off the taxable value of a senior's home, and the income test that gates it ignores Social Security entirely, so a retiree living mostly on the check qualifies with room to spare. That's the pattern for the whole town, really. Nothing flashy, everything functional. Ohio never touches Social Security either, so the yearly ledger reads simply: $170,000 house, the homestead trim on the tax bill, a cost of living well under the national line, and a check that arrives whole. Coshocton Regional Medical Center keeps a hospital inside city limits. Clary Gardens grows 20 acres of botanical calm on the west side. Lake Park strings the riverfront with walking paths. And a small wine trail loops the Three River Valleys for the afternoons when the porch feels too familiar. Drive 40 minutes west and you're in the heart of one of the largest Amish populations in America, which in practical retiree terms means produce auctions, roadside pie, and furniture built like it's apologizing for the modern world. October is the town's showpiece, when the hills turn and Roscoe Village runs its apple butter weekend, and the whole district smells like cinnamon and wood smoke. Columbus sits 90 minutes southwest for airports and specialists. What's the catch in a town like this? Mostly that the ceiling is low. The county has been losing population for decades. The restaurant scene rotates rather than grows, and a big Saturday means the village, the lake, or the gardens. Quiet compounds here like interest. Whether that's the asset or the liability is entirely about who's asking. Look at a road atlas of Maine and find where the highways give up. That's Millinocket, the last real town before Baxter State Park, with Katahdin, the state's tallest mountain, filling the end of Main Street like a billboard nobody paid for. They called this the Magic City because it appeared out of raw forest in about a year, built around what was then the largest paper mill on Earth, and the mill money left behind white streets, solid houses, and a library grander than a town this size has any right to. When the mill finally closed, the housing market froze in time. The typical home costs about $165,000 on Zillow's June index, the cheapest address in New England tonight, and solid mill-era houses regularly trade below that number. What the money buys is geography people fly across the world for. Baxter's wilderness at the doorstep, the national monument lands east of town holding some of the darkest night skies on the eastern seaboard, where the Milky Way shows up like weather. Moose in the shallows of the lakes north of town, loons on the evening water, and the west branch of the Penobscot pouring through Ripogenis Gorge, where rafters ride the big water all summer. In winter, the town flips identities and becomes one of the great snowmobile crossroads of the East, sleds outnumbering cars on some February weekends, which keeps the diners and motels alive through the cold months. And every September, the Appalachian Trail delivers its graduation class because the trail ends on Katahdin, and the finishers stagger into town for their first real meal in 5 months, looking like happy castaways. Watching them from a booth with a coffee is a local spectator sport. Millinocket Regional Hospital, small but real, holds the line locally, with Bangor's big systems 90 minutes south. Now the counterweight, and in Maine it arrives by truck. Most homes here heat with oil. Maine leans on heating oil more than any other state in the country, and the deep Katahdin winter burns money in a way a Texas retiree would not believe. Budget the oil like a second property tax, get the insulation checked before the first frost, and the math still works, because the house cost you a third of what your neighbors paid for theirs back home. If you followed me this far north, past the Moose and the Milgos, do one thing before the final 4 towns. Hit subscribe. Even the Moose would, and they don't have thumbs. Number 4 is Buchanan, West Virginia, and its timing is perfect. This is a year West Virginia's tax on Social Security hit 0. The state phased it down in thirds, and as of the 2026 tax year, the phase-out is complete. Every dollar of every check fully exempt. No income test, no fine print. Pair that with property taxes that have long run among the lowest in the country and a typical home costing just under $163,000 on the June index, and the arithmetic gets hard to argue with. Zillow's Vental Index makes the same point from the other side. Typical rent in town sits just above $900 a month, which means the average check could cover the rent twice over and still leave grocery money. Buchanan itself is the kind of town the numbers don't capture. A college green at the center, West Virginia Wesleyan's brick campus keeping lectures, concerts, and ball games open to the public, and a main street of independent shops that fills completely for a week every May when the Strawberry Festival takes over. A tradition pushing 90 years with parades, band competitions, and every church basement in the county selling shortcake. St. Joseph's Hospital, part of the state university's medical system, sits a few blocks from downtown, an unusual amount of medicine for a town of 5,000. The Riverwalk follows the Buchanan through town. Audra State Park's gorge and swimming holes wait 20 minutes east, and up in the hills hides Helvetia, a Swiss settlers village where the Fastnac masks come out every winter, and the cheese is homemade, the kind of half-secret day trip that makes visitors think you invented it. Run the average check against this town and watch what's left. Rent paid, utilities paid, groceries in the cart, and money still standing before any pension or savings even enters the picture. Very few American towns can print that sentence honestly. The honest note is the one that hangs over much of the state. The hills that make it beautiful make it hard to reach. Pittsburgh and Charleston are each better than 2 hours, and the local economy leans hard on the college and the hospital. Home value, $163,000. Rent, $900. Check, untouched. That's the whole pitch. Every September, this town of 11,000 quietly quadruples. Pickers and fiddlers from every state roll into Winfield, Kansas for the Walnut Valley Festival, 5 days of national flat-picking championships that have run for over 50 years, and the campgrounds along the Walnut River turn into a small acoustic nation where somebody is always playing and nobody is ever asked to stop. The other 51 weeks are the part retirees should care about. The typical Winfield home costs $143,000 on Zillow's June index, the second cheapest of the 9, in a state that just took itself off your check entirely. Kansas eliminated its income tax on Social Security benefits, no income cap, retroactive to the start of 2024, ending years of a cliff that taxed the entire benefit the moment a retiree earned $1 too much. That cliff was famous among accountants and hated among everyone else, and now it's simply gone. The town holds up its end of the deal. William Newton Hospital is an unusually strong county hospital for a town this size, with a surgery center and specialty clinics that keep most appointments local. Southwestern College keeps a small 4-year campus on the hill with concerts and lecture series open to the town. Island Park, the festival grounds themselves, doubles as everyone's backyard the rest of the year, walking paths and river shade included. The city lake northeast of town covers the fishing habit, and the brick downtown still has a movie theater and a bakery, the two institutions that quietly predict whether a town is alive. Between Septembers, the music never fully stops either. The jams just migrate indoors, to living rooms and church halls, and a retiree with a mandolin and modest nerve will have a standing invitation within a month. Wichita's airport and specialists sit 45 minutes northwest. The catch is Kansas summer, which arrives with heat advisory stable to it, and a prairie horizon that some people find restful and others find loud in its emptiness. Remember the free bathhouse in Thermopolis? Winfield's version of free is a $143,000 house with a banjo festival attached. The cheapest riverfront living in the Northeast is hiding in the most expensive state on this list, and almost nobody outside the North Country knows it. Ogdensburg sits where the Oswegatchie meets the St. Lawrence, the only city in America on that river, with Canada visible across the water and ocean-bound freighters sliding past a lighthouse close enough to read their names. The French planted a mission here in 1749, making this one of the oldest settlements between the coast and the Great Lakes, and the town has been watching ships go by ever since. The typical home costs $126,000 on Zillow's June index. Read that again, then remember this is waterfront New York. The state, for all its reputation, never touches Social Security, and homeowners 65 and up get the enhanced star break on school taxes, worth hundreds of dollars a year, with an income limit north of $110,000 that the average check doesn't come close to threatening. Starting this year, the state even upgrades seniors to it automatically instead of making them chase paperwork, which for New York counts as a personality change. The town's cultural card is a strange and wonderful one. The Frederick Remington Art Museum, the deepest collection anywhere of the man who invented the Cowboy West in bronze and paint, fills a riverfront mansion in a town of 10,000, and you can see it on a Tuesday with the galleries nearly to yourself. Claxton Hepburn Medical Center covers the hospital column. The Thousand Islands and Bolt Castle wait 45 minutes upriver for the summer boat days, and winter turns the river bays into a village of ice fishing shanties chasing perch. The map deserves one more sentence. Beyond the untouched check, New York excludes the first $20,000 of pension and retirement account income for anyone past 59 and a half, so a modest nest egg rides along tax-free here too, a detail the state's reputation never gets credit for. Now the ledger's other side, and it's heavy. North Country winters are long, gray, and serious. The regional economy has been losing altitude for decades, and New York still taxes pensions and retirement withdrawals beyond its generous exclusions. So retirees with big taxable income do their math carefully here. But 60 of those average checks buy the entire house outright on the St. Lawrence, lighthouse included. What exactly is number one supposed to do to beat this? Here's what number one does. It stops playing defense entirely. Oil City, Pennsylvania sits in a bend of the Allegheny River, in the valley where the modern oil industry was born, and the typical home here costs about $93,000 on Zillow's June index. That's 45 average Social Security checks for the whole house, not the down payment, the house. And then Pennsylvania, of all states, turns out to run the most retiree-friendly income tax in the country because the Commonwealth taxes retirement income at a flat rate of nothing. Your check, exempt. Your pension, exempt. Your retirement account withdrawals after retirement age, exempt. A retiree in Oil City can draw $40,000 a year and hand the state an income tax of zero, a deal that no income tax states advertise and Pennsylvania somehow keeps quiet. Then it goes further. The state's property tax and rent rebate program mails qualifying homeowners and renters up to $1,000 back every year. The income limit sits at just over $48,000, and only half your Social Security even counts toward it, which puts a typical Oil City retiree comfortably inside the line. The town wrapped around this math is genuinely lovely in the way that only sudden old money can manage. When oil struck here in the 1860s, this valley briefly held some of the richest ground on Earth, and the boom built it grand. Iron-fronted commercial blocks, a domed library, hillsides of Victorian mansions with river views that would run seven figures in any coastal state. The bus left it all standing, priced for whoever showed up next. And for a while, the town ran a program actively recruiting artists with exactly that pitch. Oil Creek State Park starts at the north edge of town. 52 miles of gorge trails past the ghost boomtowns. The Drake Well, where it all began, sits 15 minutes up the creek in Titusville, and the Allegheny itself carries kayaks through downtown all summer. UPMC Northwest, a full regional hospital, sits 10 minutes east, with Pittsburgh's medical giants 90 minutes south. The honest ledger, because every town gets one, this is a shrinking Rust Belt river town. The median local income is low, some blocks carry the wear openly, and gray Allegheny winters ask something of a person. It's also the entire pattern of tonight's list compressed into one zip code. Ogdensburg's cheap river house, Buchanan's untouched check, Bartlesville's frozen tax bill, Thermopolis's free amenity. All of it happens here at once, in a state most retirement lists skip on reflex. The check that ran out early somewhere else pays the mortgage, the taxes, the heat, and the diner breakfast here. And the state's cut of your retirement, start to finish, is $0.00. That's how a $2,084 check lasts the longest in America. 20 towns, one check, and the same lesson every time. The check never changed tonight, the zip code did. Half this list sits in states that rewrote their retirement taxes in just the last 3 years: Kansas, Missouri, Nebraska, West Virginia, Michigan, which means the map is quietly moving in your favor, and the towns that benefit most are the small ones nobody profiles. Now the honesty beat, because a channel that skips it is selling something. Home values are Zillow's June figures, and they move monthly. Tax rules carry income limits, residency clocks, and deadlines I could only sketch. And two of tonight's best perks make newcomers wait years. Verify everything against your own situation on the official sources before you so much as price a moving truck. If you've lived in any of these 20, give me the real ledger in the comments, what a month honestly costs and what the guidebooks miss. That's what makes the next list sharper. And if a $2,000 check covering a whole life is the kind of math you want more of, subscribe and bring your calculator. The playbook has plenty of pages left.